The chilling text from an unknown number arrived during what should have been a peaceful dinner with my daughter. Turn on the camera now, it read, promising chaos I couldn't yet comprehend. Sarah's laughter filled my dining room, warm and familiar, as she reached across the table to share something amusing on her phone. At 67, I'd learned to treasure these moments, the simple joy of a father and daughter sharing a meal, the continuation of traditions that stretched back through decades of careful nurturing. The house around us held 43 years of memories. Margaret and I had chosen every fixture, painted every room, planted the garden that now bloomed with the maturity that only comes from patient tending. The dining room table where we sat had witnessed birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and countless family discussions. It was here that Margaret and I had made the difficult financial decisions that allowed us to provide Sarah with every advantage: private school, college education, study abroad programs, and the down payment for her first apartment. I had worked for 38 years at Morrison Associates, climbing from junior accountant to senior partner through dedication and careful planning. Every promotion, every bonus, every prudent investment had been made with family in mind. Margaret and I lived modestly, driving older cars and taking simple vacations, because we believed in building something substantial for our daughter's future. The life insurance policies, the retirement accounts, the slowly appreciating value of our home, all of it represented security and opportunity for the next generation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Now, let's return to this profound tale of trust, betrayal, and the wisdom that comes through adversity. Sarah had always been our pride. Graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, landed a position with a prestigious marketing firm, married a promising young lawyer. From the outside, her life appeared to be the fulfillment of every parent's dreams. She dressed impeccably, lived in an elegant apartment on the Upper East Side, and spoke confidently about her career prospects and investment strategies. Margaret and I had congratulated ourselves on raising such a capable, independent daughter. Yet in recent months, I'd noticed subtle changes. Sarah's visits had become more frequent, often coinciding with casual mentions of unexpected expenses. Her car had needed major repairs. Her apartment building had implemented new fees. Her company had delayed promised bonuses. Each explanation was reasonable, delivered with the sophisticated vocabulary of someone well-versed in financial matters. When she mentioned temporary cash flow issues, it seemed natural to help. After all, what was the purpose of financial security if not to support your family during challenging times? The requests had been modest at first: $500 to cover a security deposit, $1,000 to handle an emergency medical bill, $2,000 to bridge the gap until her bonus arrived. Each loan came with detailed repayment plans and expressions of gratitude that reminded me of the thoughtful child who used to write thank you notes for every birthday gift. Margaret, ever practical, had suggested we track these loans more carefully, but I dismissed her concerns as unnecessary skepticism. Sarah was our daughter, an accomplished professional with every intention of honoring her commitments. The mysterious text message seemed to hang in the air between us as Sarah continued sharing stories from her day. She spoke eloquently about a challenging client presentation, her words flowing with the confidence of someone comfortable in professional settings. Yet something in her demeanor had shifted over recent months. The easy laughter came less frequently. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she would glance at with a brief, tight expression before returning to our conversation with renewed brightness. As we finished dinner, I excused myself to clear the dishes, carrying them to the kitchen where Margaret's presence still lingered in every carefully organized cabinet and well-maintained appliance. It was there, among the familiar surroundings of domestic stability, that I discovered the folded check tucked behind the coffee maker. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper and recognized what appeared to be my own signature authorizing a payment of $5,000 to cash. The signature looked authentically mine, the careful formation of each letter, the slight flourish at the end of my surname that I developed over decades of signing legal documents. Yet I had no memory of writing this check. The date was 3 days prior, a Tuesday, when I'd spent the afternoon in my study organizing tax documents. I would have remembered such a significant withdrawal, particularly one made out to cash rather than a specific payee or institution. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the accumulated comfort of a lifetime's careful planning, I felt the first tremor of something that would reshape my understanding of trust, family, and the boundaries between generosity and enabling. The check represented more than money. It was evidence of a fundamental breach of the relationship I'd believed to be beyond question. The sound of Sarah's heels clicking on the hardwood floor announced her approach to the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, her designer purse slung elegantly over her shoulder, keys jingling with the confident rhythm of someone accustomed to moving through the world with purpose and authority. When she saw me standing at the counter with the check in my hands, she froze. For just a moment, her carefully maintained composure slipped, revealing something vulnerable and defensive beneath the polished exterior. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, but her voice carried a note I hadn't heard since her teenage years, the particular tension of someone who knew they'd been caught in wrongdoing. I lifted the check slightly, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is your work, isn't it? This signature clearly isn't mine, though someone has taken considerable care to make it appear so." Sarah stepped forward, her expression shifting through several emotions before settling on a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Dad, it's not what you think. I just need it. You forged my signature." The words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never expected to use in connection with my own daughter. Her composure cracked further. "Listen to me," she said, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she'd perfected in her marketing career. "I'm in trouble, okay? Real trouble. The bills are piling up, and I couldn't ask you again after borrowing so much already. So you decided to steal from me instead." The word steal hit her like a physical blow. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles white against the granite Margaret and I had chosen during our kitchen renovation 5 years earlier. "It's not stealing," she said with the logic of someone who'd clearly rehearsed this rationalization. "You're my father. I knew you'd help me if you understood the full situation." "Understood what?" "That my daughter has become a criminal." Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, a glimpse of the desperation that had driven her to this point. "A criminal? Really? After everything I've been through since Mom died, you think I wanted this?" My chest tightened at the mention of Margaret. Her death 18 months earlier had been devastating for both of us, but we'd processed our grief differently. I'd found solace in maintaining our established routines, in preserving the home and life we'd built together. Sarah had responded with what I'd interpreted as admirable determination to embrace new experiences and opportunities. Only now did I begin to wonder if what I'd seen as healing had actually been a spiral into behavior I'd failed to recognize. "Your mother always worried that you valued financial success more than genuine relationships," I said quietly, remembering conversations Margaret and I had shared about Sarah's approach to money and material possessions. "Don't." Sarah's voice turned cold, more bitter than I'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare bring Mom into this. She would have understood what I'm facing. She would have helped you by encouraging you to forge my signature, by supporting your decision to lie and steal." Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and when she laughed, the sound was hollow and broken. "You really think this is about one check? You really have no idea, do you?" Something in her tone made my stomach drop with a sickening certainty that this conversation was about to become much worse. "What do you mean?" She turned away, walking toward the living room with the jerky efficiency of someone preparing to flee. I followed, still clutching the check that had started this revelation. "Sarah, what did you mean? What don't I know?" She was shoving items into her purse, now her phone charger from the coffee table, a bottle of perfume from the mantel, moving with the desperate haste of someone whose carefully constructed facade was crumbling. "Sarah, answer me." You want answers? She spun around, her eyes blazing with years of suppressed resentment. Fine. This isn't the first time, Dad. It's not even close. And honestly, I'm not sorry about any of it. The room seemed to tilt around me. My legs felt weak as the implications of her words settled into my consciousness. What are you saying? I'm saying you've never understood the pressure I live under. Mom did, but you just judge. Always criticism, never solutions. She zipped her purse shut with violent force. I'm done trying to explain myself to someone who sees me as a disappointment. How many times? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Sarah paused at the front door, her hand on the brass knob Margaret, and I had chosen when we'd replaced the original hardware 20 years earlier. She looked back at me with something that might have been pity. More than you want to know, Dad. Way more than you want to know. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the family photographs on the nearby wall. Through the window, I watched her stride to her car, her heels clicking against the driveway with the same confident rhythm I'd admired just minutes earlier. The engine roared to life, and she was gone, leaving me alone in my living room with the devastating realization that the daughter I thought I knew had been systematically betraying my trust for months, possibly years. The subway car rocked beneath me as we approached the financial district station. I'd barely slept, Sarah's words echoing through my mind with increasing dread. More than you want to know. The check felt heavy in my jacket pocket, folded and refolded until the creases had worn soft. I needed to understand the full extent of what had been done to me, though part of me feared the knowledge I was about to acquire. The bank building stretched 40 stories into the gray morning sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the purposeful energy of Manhattan's financial district. Inside, marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the measured bustle of morning business surrounded me with the comforting sounds of institutional stability. I approached the customer service desk and asked to speak with someone who could help me review my account history comprehensively. Mr. Thompson, a woman in her 30s approached, extending a firm handshake. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Senior Loan Specialist. I understand you have questions about your account activity. We settled at her desk. Separated by neat stacks of paperwork and a computer screen, she angled toward me with professional courtesy. I pulled out the check with hands that trembled slightly despite my efforts to maintain composure. I found this among my papers yesterday, I explained. I have no recollection of writing it, and I'm concerned there may be irregularities in my account. Jennifer examined the check with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every variety of financial irregularity. Her professional smile faltered slightly as she studied the signature and date. I see your concern, Mr. Thompson. Let me pull up your complete account profile and transaction history. Her fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard. After several moments of concentrated attention to her screen, she looked up with an expression that confirmed my worst fears. Mr. Thompson, I need to inform you that you have an active loan for $500,000. The words hit me like ice water. That's impossible. I never applied for such a loan. According to our records, it was approved 6 months ago. She turned the screen toward me, displaying digital images of documents I'd never seen before. Here's your signature on all the application materials. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The signatures looked exactly like mine, not just similar, but perfect replicas of the careful penmanship I developed over decades of professional correspondence. Yet I remembered nothing about these documents, these meetings, these enormous financial commitments. This is forgery, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant even to myself. My daughter, dear God, what has she done? Jennifer's expression softened with the compassion of someone who delivered devastating financial news before. Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry. If these signatures are indeed fraudulent, we're looking at a very serious situation. I need to show you everything. For the next 45 minutes, she walked me through a trail of financial destruction that defied comprehension. The $500,000 loan was merely the most recent and largest in a series of fraudulent transactions. There were credit cards opened in my name, smaller personal loans, cash advances, all bearing my forged signature, all approved because my credit score had been spotless before this systematic assault began. The total exposure is approximately $700,000, Jennifer said gently, her professional training evident in how carefully she delivered this crushing information. My vision blurred. $700,000. My entire retirement savings, my home equity, everything Margaret and I had built over 40 years of marriage gone. Stolen by the daughter we'd sacrificed to educate and support. When did this begin? I managed to ask. The first transaction we can identify was 11 months ago. A small credit card with a $5,000 limit. From there, it escalated systematically. 11 months ago, right after Margaret's funeral, when Sarah had been so devastated, so apparently lost in grief. While I'd been focused on comforting her, she'd been planning this elaborate theft. The timing felt like a second betrayal, a violation not just of my trust, but of Margaret's memory. What were my options? Jennifer handed me a stack of photocopied documents. You'll need to file police reports for identity theft and fraud. The bank will launch a full investigation. But Mr. Thompson, she paused, choosing her words with obvious care. This level of systematic fraud, especially by a family member, presents complex legal and financial challenges. I stood on unsteady legs, clutching the documents that represented the destruction of my financial security. The bank's air conditioning felt arctic against my skin as the reality settled over me like a weight I'd carry for the rest of my life. Mr. Thompson, I'm required to inform you that several of these loans are already in default status. You'll be receiving legal notices soon. The elevator ride down seemed endless. When I finally stepped onto the sidewalk, the summer heat hit me like a physical blow. People streamed past talking on phones, carrying coffee, living their normal lives while mine crumbled into something unrecognizable. I looked down at the papers in my hands, evidence of my daughter's betrayal printed in stark black and white. My keys clattered against the kitchen counter with sharp finality. The house felt different now, like returning to a crime scene rather than the sanctuary Margaret and I had created together. I spread the bank documents across the same table where I discovered that first check just 24 hours earlier, arranging them chronologically to create a timeline of Sarah's deception. November, first credit card, $5,000. December, personal loan for $20,000. January, another credit card with a $15,000 limit. February, the massive mortgage against my house, the home Margaret and I had bought as newlyweds, where we'd raised Sarah, where Margaret had died in our bedroom upstairs surrounded by 40 years of shared memories. I walked to the living room, needing to see Margaret's face. Her photograph smiled at me from the mantel, taken on our 30th anniversary cruise. She'd worn her blue dress, the one Sarah had borrowed for a work function and never returned. The coincidence now seemed loaded with significance I'd been too trusting to recognize. What would you tell me to do? I asked the empty room, my voice echoing slightly in the space where we'd shared so many evenings discussing our hopes and concerns about Sarah's future. Margaret had always been more perceptive about our daughter's relationship with money and material success. She confuses having things with being happy, Margaret had observed after Sarah's college graduation, when our daughter had seemed more excited about the luxury gifts she'd received than the achievement they celebrated. One day, that confusion might cost her more than she realizes. I defended Sarah then, calling Margaret's concerns unnecessarily harsh. Our daughter was ambitious and goal-oriented qualities that would serve her well in the competitive professional world. I'd failed to see the distinction Margaret was drawing between healthy ambition and the kind of material obsession that could corrupt judgment and relationships. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out a legal pad and began writing, trying to organize my thoughts and options with a methodical approach that had served me well throughout my career. The possibilities were limited and all painful. I could file criminal charges, which would likely result in Sarah going to prison. I could attempt to handle the situation privately, demanding restitution and hoping to salvage some vestige of our relationship. Or I could absorb the losses and try to rebuild my financial security in whatever years remained to me. But the numbers told their own story. Even if Sarah genuinely wanted to make restitution, which seemed unlikely given her defiant reaction yesterday, she clearly didn't have $700,000. Nobody accumulates that kind of debt accidentally. This had been systematic, calculated theft carried out over nearly a year while she looked me in the eye and accepted my help with her supposed temporary difficulties. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Sarah's contact information. My finger hovered over the call button as I tried to imagine what such a conversation might accomplish. What did I hope would happen? That she'd break down crying, apologize profusely, promise to somehow make everything right? That we'd reconcile with tears and embraces like we had at Margaret's funeral? The woman who'd slammed out of this house yesterday wasn't that person. The woman who'd forged my signature dozens of times, who'd mortgaged my home without my knowledge, who'd looked me in the eye and called me judgmental while stealing my financial security, that woman was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. I set the phone down and walked to the window overlooking our backyard. Sarah's childhood swing set still stood near the garden, rusted but intact. I'd built it myself when she turned 7, spending 3 weekends ensuring every bolt was secure. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent her entire childhood trying to keep her safe, and she'd grown up to become the person I most needed protection from. My phone buzzed with a text from my old friend Robert. Haven't heard from you since the memorial service. Coffee this afternoon. Robert Martinez had been my closest friend for over 25 years, a retired police detective who'd seen every variety of human betrayal in his professional life. If anyone would know how to navigate this situation, it would be him. I found myself staring at Sarah's contact again. She needed to know that I'd discovered the full extent of her fraud. Whether I pursued criminal charges or attempted some form of private resolution, she had to understand that this wasn't going away. Silence wouldn't make the debt disappear or transform the forged signatures into legitimate transactions. My finger moved to her contact. One call would begin a conversation that would change everything between us forever. But avoiding that conversation wouldn't protect either of us from the consequences of what she'd done. I pressed the number and listened to it ring, knowing that whatever happened next would define not just our relationship, but how I chose to face the remaining years of my life. 24 hours later, I stared at Sarah's contact on my phone screen for what felt like the 100th time. The bank documents lay spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a trial. I'd rehearsed what to say, considered every possible approach, but my fingers still trembled as I finally made the call. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. "What do you want, Dad?" Her voice carried the same cold edge from our confrontation, but underneath, I detected something new: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "Sarah, I know about the $500,000 loan. I know about all of it. I need you to explain this to me." Silence stretched between us. I could hear a television in the background, some comedy show with canned laughter that felt obscene given the gravity of our situation. "What loan?" she asked finally, but her tone had shifted. The confidence was gone, replaced by the defensive uncertainty of someone whose lies were crumbling. "The loan you took against my house without my knowledge. The bank showed me everything, Sarah. 12 separate fraudulent transactions totaling $700,000. The television went silent on her end. I pictured her reaching for the remote with shaking hands, the same way I'd reached for that first check. "You went to the bank." Her voice came out small, like the little girl who used to come to me with skinned knees and broken toys. I hadn't known how deep this went. Now I do. I picked up one of the documents, reading from it with deliberate precision. November 15th. Personal loan, $20,000. December 3rd. Credit card application. January 8th. Stop. The word came out sharp, desperate. Just stop. Okay. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. You mortgaged my house, Sarah. The house your mother and I bought together, where she died, where I planned to spend my remaining years. You always make everything about money, she said, her voice turning vicious. What about what I've been going through? What about my problems? My free hand clenched into a fist. Your problems? You created these problems by stealing from your own father. I didn't steal anything. I needed help. And you're always so careful with money, like Mom was. Neither of you ever understood what it's like to want something better. The mention of Margaret hit like a physical blow. Don't you dare bring your mother into this. She would be ashamed of what you've become. Ashamed? She understood me better than you ever did. She knew what it was like to want things, to dream about a better life. You never understood either of us. I stood up, pacing to the window where Mrs. Rodriguez from next door was tending her garden, living her peaceful life while mine exploded around me. Your mother warned me about your relationship with money, I said quietly. She said you confused having things with being happy. She said one day that confusion would hurt someone. She said that. Sarah's voice cracked. She said one day it would cost you more than you realized. I thought she meant it would hurt you. I never imagined she meant it would destroy me. Dad, listen. No, you listen. The words came out harder than I intended, carrying 40 years of accumulated disappointment. I trusted you completely. After your mother died, I tried to be there for you in every way possible. I gave you money when you asked. I never questioned where it went or why you needed it. And this is how you repay that trust. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The bills, the expectations, pressure you created by living beyond your means and stealing from your father. I was surprised by my own clarity, the calm that was settling over me as I finally spoke the truth we'd both been avoiding. I had a simple retirement plan, Sarah, enough money to live comfortably, maybe take that trip to Ireland your mother and I always talked about. Now I might lose everything because my own daughter is a thief. I'm not a thief. You forged my signature dozens of times. You took out loans in my name. You stole $700,000 from me. What would you call that? The line went quiet except for her breathing heavy, angry breathing that reminded me of her childhood tantrums when she didn't get her way. I call it survival, she said finally. And if you can't understand that, then maybe Mom was right about more than just money. What's that supposed to mean? Figure it out yourself. The line went dead. I stood holding the silent phone, staring at my reflection in its dark screen. In the distance, I could hear children playing in someone's backyard, their laughter carrying on the evening air like an echo of simpler times. $700,000. My daughter. My only family left. I set the phone down next to the documents and tried to figure out what came next, knowing that whatever I decided would define not just my financial future, but my moral legacy. The next morning, I climbed the familiar stairs to Robert's apartment, clutching a manila folder stuffed with evidence of my daughter's betrayal. My legs felt heavy, weighted down by more than just the physical exertion. I'd barely slept after Sarah hung up on me, spending the night staring at the ceiling where Margaret and I used to plan our future together. Robert answered on the second knock, his weathered face immediately creasing with concern. John, you look terrible. I need to talk to someone who understands criminals, I said simply. He stepped aside, gesturing me into his modest kitchen where coffee was already brewing. Robert had always been a steady presence in my life, 25 years with the NYPD, retired now, but still possessing the sharp instincts that had made him an excellent detective. What's going on? He asked, pouring 2 cups of black coffee and settling across from me at his scarred wooden table. I opened the folder, watching papers spill out like accusations. Robert, I don't know what to do. She's my daughter. His gray eyes, the same ones that had interrogated countless suspects and comforted numerous victims, focused on the documents with professional intensity. Start from the beginning. So I did. The forged check in my kitchen, the devastating bank visit, the systematic fraud that had destroyed my financial security while I'd been trusting and supportive. Robert listened without interruption, occasionally picking up a document to examine it more closely. $500,000, he said finally, setting down the mortgage papers. John, this isn't petty theft or a moment of weakness. This is serious organized fraud. But I can't put my own child in prison. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying me with the patience of someone who'd heard every family tragedy imaginable. And she can destroy you financially without any consequences. Have you considered that perspective? I had, lying awake through the endless night hours, weighing love against justice, family loyalty against self-preservation. Maybe if I give her more time, she'll come to her senses. Find a way to make this right. Time for what? To forge more signatures? To find new ways to steal from you? Robert stood up, walking to his kitchen window that overlooked the same Brooklyn neighborhood where we'd both lived for decades. John, in my experience, people who commit this level of fraud don't suddenly develop consciences. They escalate. She's not some street criminal. She's my daughter, who stole $700,000 from you. He turned back to face me, his expression mixing sympathy with professional realism. Family or not, that's felony fraud. Multiple counts. I watched him organize the papers into neat piles, his investigative instincts automatically taking over. Document by document, he was building a case, probably without even realizing it. What would you do? I asked. If it were your child? Robert sat back down, his expression softening slightly. I want to believe they could change, too. But I'd also protect myself and prevent them from hurting other people. Ow! File a police report. Get this documented officially. Even if you don't press charges immediately, you need legal protection. And John, he paused, meeting my eyes directly. You need to understand that your daughter is probably not going to stop with you. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think she's done this to others? People who commit systematic fraud like this usually have multiple victims. The skills required, the planning, the psychological ability to maintain deception over months, these don't develop overnight. I gathered the documents back into the folder, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. Robert walked me to the door, his hand heavy on my shoulder. You're a good father, he said. But sometimes being a good father means making hard choices to protect everyone involved. I walked home slowly, the folder tucked under my arm like a shield I wasn't sure I was ready to use. What I didn't know was that Robert had already made his own decision. Within an hour of my departure, he was on the phone with his former colleagues, setting in motion events that would force my hand in ways I couldn't yet imagine. 3 days passed in tense silence. I waited by the phone, hoping Sarah would call with some explanation, some sign that the daughter I'd raised still existed somewhere beneath the stranger who'd hung up on me. On Thursday evening, while I sat picking at a microwave dinner that tasted like cardboard, my phone finally rang. Hi, Dad. Sarah's voice was completely different, soft, hesitant, almost shy. I've been thinking about our last conversation. I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I know, and I'm sorry about that. I was scared and angry, and I said things I didn't mean. She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. I've been doing a lot of soul searching these past few days. My heart began to pound with something that felt dangerously like hope. Have you? I realize I hurt you, really hurt you, and I want to make everything right between us. Her tone carried the same quality she'd used as a child when she'd broken something valuable and wanted to fix it before I discovered the damage. I want that too, sweetheart. Can you come for dinner tomorrow night? I'll cook that pot roast with carrots you always loved when Mom made it. Tears pricked in my eyes. Margaret's pot roast had been a family tradition, something Sarah hadn't prepared since the funeral. Of course, I knew you'd understand eventually. There was relief in her voice, genuine warmth that reminded me of better times. And Dad, bring all those papers from the bank. We'll go through everything together and figure out how to fix this mess. The relief flooding through me was so intense, I had to sit down. Really? You mean that? I mean it. 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And Dad, yes, I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a smile I couldn't contain. The Sarah who'd called was the Sarah I remembered, thoughtful, remorseful, ready to take responsibility. The harsh woman from our previous conversations must have been fear talking, panic at being discovered. People could change, especially when they realized how much they stood to lose. I spent the next day planning what I'd say, how we'd work together to resolve the financial crisis. Maybe she could arrange a loan from her company, or we could negotiate payment plans with the various creditors. The important thing was that we'd face it together, as a family should. At 6:30, I loaded the manila folder into my car and drove toward Manhattan. Traffic was unusually light, and I found parking right outside Sarah's building. Everything seemed to be falling into place, a sign that reconciliation was possible even after such devastating betrayal. As I rode the elevator to her floor, I caught myself humming something I hadn't done since Margaret died. The familiar melody reminded me of evenings when our family had been whole and happy, when trust had been absolute and love unconditional. The smell of pot roast greeted me as soon as Sarah opened the door, and for a moment, it felt like stepping back in time. Dad, she embraced me tightly, and I noticed she'd styled her hair the way Margaret used to prefer. I'm so glad you came. Her apartment was transformed. The table was set with her good china, candles flickering between crystal wine glasses. She'd even put on the blue dress I'd bought her last Christmas, the one that reminded me so much of her mother. "This looks wonderful," I said, genuinely moved by the effort she'd made. I wanted it to be special, a new beginning for us. She took the folder from my hands, setting it carefully on the side table. "We'll look at all this after dinner, okay? I want to understand everything." I squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with gratitude that my daughter had returned to me. What I didn't realize was that I was walking into the most sophisticated trap she'd ever constructed. The evening began beautifully. Sarah had prepared everything exactly as Margaret used to, from the seasoning on the roast to the way she'd arranged the vegetables around the meat. We talked about happier times, shared memories of family vacations and holiday celebrations. For nearly an hour, I allowed myself to believe that love had conquered the darkness that had threatened to destroy us. But as we finished the main course, I began to notice subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Sarah kept glancing at the folder containing the bank documents, and her conversation became increasingly focused on financial matters. She asked detailed questions about my retirement accounts, my life insurance policies, my estate planning, questions that seemed natural enough in the context of our situation, but felt somehow calculating in their precision. "Dad, about those documents you brought," she said as she served dessert Margaret's apple pie recipe, perfectly executed. "I've been thinking about the logistics of how we solve this problem. I'm just grateful we're going to work through this together," I replied, savoring both the familiar flavors and the apparent restoration of our relationship. "Absolutely. That's exactly what I want." She leaned forward, her expression shifting into something more businesslike. "But here's what I need from you to make this work." Something in her tone made me pause, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you need?" "To pay back that money, I'll need capital to get started. Seed money for investments that can generate the income to make restitution." The apple pie turned to ash in my mouth. "Seed money. Just a temporary loan, maybe 100,000 to begin with. I have opportunities that could generate significant returns quickly. It's the only way I can realistically pay you back the full amount." I set down my fork, staring at my daughter across the candlelit table that had seemed so warm and welcoming just moments before. "Sarah, you owe me $700,000. I didn't come here to loan you more money. But Dad, think about it logically." Her voice took on the patronizing tone she'd perfected in her marketing career. "I can't generate money to pay you back if I don't have money to invest. This is basic business strategy." "This is not a business strategy. This is you asking your victimized father for more money after stealing his life savings." Her mask of sweetness was slipping rapidly. "I'm proposing a solution. You want her money back, right? This is how we make that happen." I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Sarah, this is insane. You committed multiple felonies against me, and now you want me to give you more money. It's not giving, it's investing. Her voice rose sharply, revealing the desperation beneath her carefully constructed performance. You're being incredibly short-sighted about this. I'm being short-sighted? I stood up, finally seeing the evening for what it truly was. You systematically stole from me for nearly a year, and I'm the one being unreasonable. Everything I did was for survival. Sarah stood as well, her facade cracking completely. You have no idea what kind of pressure I live under, what it costs to maintain any kind of decent life in this city. So you decided to destroy mine instead. I decided to use resources that were ultimately going to be mine anyway. She gestured wildly around her expensive apartment. When you die, I inherit everything. I just needed access to some of it now. The words hit me like physical blows, each one more devastating than the last. This wasn't my daughter. Speaking this was a stranger who'd coldly calculated my death as a business opportunity, who saw my life's work as nothing more than an inconvenient delay in accessing what she considered rightfully hers. Get out, she said suddenly. What? Get out of my apartment. Take your moral superiority and your self-righteousness and leave. She moved toward the side table where my folder sat. And take these documents with you. I reached for the folder, but she was closer. Our hands collided on the leather surface, and for a moment we stood there, both holding onto the evidence of her betrayal. Give me that, I said quietly. No, I think I'll keep these. We stared at each other across the folder, our faces inches apart. In her eyes, I saw nothing of the little girl who used to ask for bedtime stories, only cold calculation and barely controlled rage. My phone buzzed in my pocket with that same mysterious message from 3 days earlier. Turn on the camera now. There's going to be a show. Before I could process what was happening, there was a firm knock at the door. NYPD. Open up. Sarah's face went white. The folder fell from our hands, documents scattering across her expensive hardwood floor like fallen leaves. 20 minutes later, I stood by Sarah's window watching police officers methodically photograph and bag evidence while my daughter sat in handcuffs on her own sofa. Detective Morrison, a patient man with gray hair and kind eyes, approached me with his notebook ready. Mr. Thompson, we'll need a formal statement about the crimes committed against you. I nodded, still trying to process how quickly everything had changed. An hour ago, I'd been hoping for reconciliation. Now strangers were documenting my daughter's betrayal with clinical precision. These documents will become evidence in the prosecution, Morrison explained, carefully securing each paper. Your testimony will be crucial for establishing the timeline and extent of the fraud. Detective, how did you know to come here tonight? Morrison exchanged a glance with his partner, then smiled slightly. You have very caring friends, Mr. Thompson. Someone with law enforcement experience had been conducting their own investigation and felt it was time for official intervention. Robert. It had to be Robert. My oldest friend had orchestrated this arrest, had been watching and waiting for the perfect moment to protect me from my own inability to act. The timing was perfect, Morrison continued. We were able to record your daughter's confession and her demand for additional money. That kind of evidence makes our case very strong. As I led Sarah away, she looked back at me one final time. I hope you're satisfied, she said quietly. I hope you learned from this, I replied. That night, I sat in my living room surrounded by family photographs that suddenly felt like artifact from someone else's life. Margaret's face smiled at me from the mantel, and I wondered what she would think about the evening's events. Would she be proud that justice had been served? Heartbroken that our daughter was in jail? Grateful that Robert had protected me when I couldn't protect myself? I picked up my phone and called Robert. He answered on the first ring. You orchestrated the arrest, didn't you? I said without preamble. Yes, I did. No hesitation, no apology in his voice. How long have you been planning this? Since the day you left my apartment. I could see you'd never press charges on your own, never protect yourself adequately. so I decided to protect you instead. His matter-of-fact tone reminded me of the detective. He'd always been someone who understood that sometimes justice required action rather than hope. I had her under surveillance for 3 days, he continued. She was already working on other potential victims, John. Elderly men mostly. Your daughter wasn't going to stop with you. The revelation hit me like another blow. While I'd been agonizing over our relationship, Sarah had been expanding her criminal activities, targeting other people's fathers and grandfathers. I contacted Detective Morrison on Tuesday, showed him your documents plus my surveillance photos. They've been looking for someone matching Sarah's profile. The text message tonight, I needed video evidence of her demanding more money from you. Proof that she had no intention of making restitution. Robert paused. When I saw the argument escalating when she grabbed your folder, I knew it was time to call it in. You could have told me. No, I couldn't. You would have tried to stop me, or warned her, or found some way to protect her instead of yourself. His tone softened slightly. Friends protect each other, John, even when it hurts. 3 weeks later, Robert picked me up in his reliable Honda, and we drove together toward the federal courthouse in Manhattan for Sarah's sentencing hearing. The courthouse rose before us like a monument to consequences, its limestone columns stark against the summer sky. Ready for this? Robert asked as we climbed the steps together. As ready as I can be. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and serious. Sarah sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, looking nothing like the polished woman who'd served me dinner 3 weeks earlier. She didn't acknowledge my presence when I entered. Judge Patricia Thornton presided with quiet authority, her gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving her the appearance of someone who'd seen every variety of human failing without being surprised by any of it. Mr. Thompson, she said when my turn came to speak, would you like to provide a victim impact statement? I stood on unsteady legs, my prepared remarks trembling in my hands. Your Honor, my daughter stole $700,000 from me over 11 months. She forged my signature, opened accounts in my name, and mortgaged my house without my knowledge. My voice grew stronger as I continued. But the financial damage isn't the worst part. She destroyed my trust, manipulated my love for her, and showed no remorse until she was caught. Even then, she demanded more money instead of offering to make amends. Sarah's shoulders shook slightly, but she still didn't turn around. I love my daughter, I concluded, but I can't enable her destructive behavior anymore. She needs to face the consequences of her choices and hopefully learn from them. When Sarah was finally allowed to speak, she stood slowly, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry for what I did to my father. I was desperate and made terrible choices. But even her apology felt rehearsed, something practiced during weeks in custody rather than a genuine expression of remorse. Judge Thornton's sentencing was comprehensive and final. Sarah Thompson, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft, document forgery, and bank fraud. You are also ordered to provide full restitution to the victim in the amount of $700,000. The gavel came down with a sound like a door closing forever. As they led Sarah away, she finally looked at me. I hope this was worth it, she said quietly. I hope you use this time to understand the difference between wanting things and valuing people, I replied. Outside the courthouse, Robert and I walked slowly down the steps, the summer heat washing over us like a cleansing wave. Justice has been served, Robert said simply. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months, not happiness, but peace. There was nothing joyful about watching your child face the consequences of serious crimes. But there was relief in finally knowing that truth had prevailed over manipulation, that accountability had replaced enablement. Thank you, I told Robert, for doing what I couldn't do. That's what friendship means, he replied. We walked toward his car, two men in our 60s who'd learned that sometimes protecting someone means refusing to enable their worst impulses. Margaret would have understood. She'd always known that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was just another form of harm. Sarah would serve her time, pay her debt, and hopefully emerge with a better understanding of responsibility and respect. I would rebuild my financial security and move forward with the knowledge that I'd finally chosen justice over misguided loyalty. The scales had balanced at last. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the city continuing its daily rhythm, people working, living, building their lives on foundations of honesty and mutual respect. It was a sound full of hope. Thank you for joining me in this story of trust, betrayal, and the difficult wisdom that comes through standing up for what's right. If this resonates with your own experiences of family complexity and the importance of maintaining dignity in difficult circumstances, I invite you to subscribe for more thoughtful narratives that explore the challenges we face in protecting ourselves while still caring for those we love. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one and truly value the wisdom our community brings to these conversations. Your insights help others who may be facing similar challenges in their own lives.